All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about diversity and how we've come to be in the system that we currently find ourselves. So we're going to look at a model. We'll break that model down into some smaller pieces, talk about some examples, and move forward. So here we go. So what typically happens when we talk about diversity issues is that, first of all, our introduction to the world and to the norms and to the rules of culture, for the most part, come from what source in our development? Typically, it is our parents, our family unit, that determines a lot of what those norms are. All right. And so in our early years, what we get from our parents is missing history, bias history, missing history, bias history, and we get our parents' paradigms. And those paradigms consist of everything they know, everything they didn't know they didn't know, and everything they didn't know they didn't know, those blind spots. So in our early years, our family units give us bias history, missing history. They share their paradigms with us. They give us everything that they knew and they didn't know, and all of that stuff. And then as we grow older, we move through this chart until we get to a place of socialization. And socialization basically is summed up is learning how to act in a society. So learning how to act in society is the process of socialization. So what I start to learn is, even if my parents don't say it, is that I should respond to a certain group of people this way, or I should respond to women in this way, or these things are important to our culture. And these are both explicit and implicit things that I pick up as a young child as I learn how to operate within the world. These people are worthy of honor and praise, and these people are not worthy of honor and praise. Okay? And so I learn how to act and behave in a society based on all the things that I learned as a small child and the paradigm that my parents have passed on to me. Right? And so that stuff gets, so in the family unit, I get all of this information, these paradigms, this bias, this missing history, and then I get taught by society how to act in that society, or I learn how to act in that society. And then the society as a whole starts to reinforce these very same stereotypes of thought patterns. And that's done through the media. The media reinforces that. Government institutions reinforce that, schools reinforce that, and religious institutions encourage that. They reinforce everything that I've been taught thus far. And the whole point of this is to get to this pivotal point of internalization. That not only do I have this information and it's being reinforced by these things, that I now start to believe this information as true. This information becomes true for me because of all of these things. And not only is it true for me, do I internalize it, but in that internalization, I push it forward and I make sure that other folks know what their role is in this system. They also know what my role is in this system. And so I become an agent for this system. And so as we progress through this, we see that once we internalize, we get to a place where we collude with the system. Now, collude is a very interesting word because it means to conspire with something. All right? To conspire. Now, whether you know it or not, when you make a choice or don't make a choice, that is in fact a choice. All we have are choices. All we do is behave. And so when we internalize all of these things, we can then make a choice to, we end up colluding. That's the default mechanism. We end up going along with the system because that's what's always happened. But we do have and once we collude, we move into institutionalization, and then we teach our kids what we've been taught. The system operates the way it's always operated. It benefits the people it's always benefited. Systems perpetuate themselves based on a number of the things that we've discovered as a part of going through this cycle. And so institutionalization is the process of making sure that the institutions keep reinventing and keep selling what has been a part of the cycle for generations. But there is a saving grace, which is that you have the ability to make a choice. And the choice is to create opportunities for freedom. Right? To create opportunities for freedom. Or as I've often said, to free dumb. That dumb is free to go. Ignorance can go goodbye if we make a choice to do that. Otherwise, we continue with the system, the institutionalization continues to happen, and things continually to move the way they've always moved. All right? So let me give you an example of how this cycle works. So what is the popular story of the discovery of America? Right? The popular version is 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's the popular version, right? So let's look at this. What's the missing history or the biased history? The missing history is that it's very difficult to discover something where people already are. My neighbor just got a Porsche, and I'm trying to figure out how I can discover his Porsche. I think I'm going to use the Columbus defense. Not going to fly. Right? So the missing history is that the Vikings were here, that the Native Americans came long before across the Bering Strait. They came to the New World long before Columbus and the Spanish did. That is biased history. The history is biased towards the Spanish and the Italians. Columbus flew under the Spanish flag. He was Italian. So Spain and Italy are conspiring. No, I'm just teasing. Right? But there's biased history. How does that impact how I act or in society? It's extremely important. If I'm told that my people are nothing, and history in my early grade school reinforces that by not having me show up in history books at all, or saying that my contributions to history were minuscule to the world, then that could have an impact on how I get socialized in a society or how I act. And then it gets reinforced through the media. I remember that there used to be after-school specials, Charlie Brown specials that talked about, Columbus discovering America. The government supports that by giving people paid days off and holidays. Religion supports that in that, well, I find it interesting that, and I know these two people are not related, so I do want to say that. This is a disclaimer. But I find it interesting that Saint Christopher, who is the patron saint of travelers or lost items, is a saint. And then there is a guy named Christopher Columbus who was lost on his way to India, which is why he referred to the people there as Indians. That the church has this patron saint of lost things. So I find that very interesting. And also, there in schools, oftentimes schools still teach without balance that Christopher Columbus is noted for the discovery of America. And of the United States in particular. And so, as we look through this model, we can still see some of those old things still happening. And what happens if I start to believe this? If I believe this as the truth, and I internalize those things? Well, if I'm not a part of the winning team, then I can internalize it a lot differently than I can if I'm a member of the winning team. All right, so if I'm on the losing team, I will internalize this a little bit differently than I will if I'm on the winning team. And then I will collude, I will act as if that is the truth, and it becomes a part of institutions, and that cycle continues. And unless I choose to freedom, all right, and I can break that cycle. So we'll spend a little more time talking about this in just a little bit. Thank you.